Pregnant wife visits husband's office, discovers millionaire husband with famous Hollywood actress. Welcome, everyone, to a tale brimming with secrets, betrayals, and astonishing turns of fate. In this story, we follow a devoted wife expecting her first child as she pays an unexpected visit to her husband's office. What she discovers sends her life spiraling into a realm of tension and suspense, where trust is tested at every corner and nothing is what it seems. Prepare yourselves for hidden agendas, dramatic confrontations, and revelations that will leave you breathless. Stay tuned until the very end to witness the scales of karma tip in the most unforeseen way. Now, let's dive into our gripping narrative. Before we dive in, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. If you're excited about this story, let us know. If you enjoyed the video, press 1. If not, press O. Your feedback really inspires me to gather more uplifting and meaningful stories. Alyssa Moore had always prided herself on being the picture of composure. She had grown up in a small coastal town with its sun-dappled beaches and the mesmerizing hush of rolling waves as her daily soundtrack. But as she stepped out of her car in downtown Los Angeles, nearly 8 months pregnant, she felt a twinge of anxiety she hadn't known before. A swirl of city hustle buzzed around her, adding a nervous energy that sent tremors through her. Her husband, Grant Coleman, once an unassuming entrepreneur she'd met in college, was now a self-made millionaire with an office in the US Bank Tower. Today, she was here to surprise him with homemade pastries and perhaps a stolen kiss or two. Yet, an unshakable sense of foreboding tugged at her thoughts. It was like her intuition was warning her that something far more shocking than she could ever imagine awaited her on the 73rd floor. When Alyssa first married Grant, she was in awe of his ambition and sincerity. He'd started Coleman Enterprises from their cramped apartment living room, packaging software solutions for small businesses, with each line of code meticulously tested at a wobbly table. But after landing a massive contract with a tech giant, his fortunes skyrocketed. Invitations to exclusive galas, business luncheons at the city's most extravagant restaurants, and even weekend soirees at private estates in the Hollywood Hills became routine. Alyssa, still maintaining her gentle authenticity, rarely attended these events. Pregnancy often left her feeling fatigued and wary of large crowds. And while Grant encouraged her to stay home and rest, she couldn't shake the lingering worry that she was missing key moments in his rapidly evolving life. Yet nothing, no rumor, no late-night phone calls, no expensive receipts from suspicious places had prepared her for the possibility that he might be hiding a colossal secret. Her heart fluttered as she walked through the plush marble-floored lobby. She politely nodded at the security guard before riding the elevator up to Grant's office suite. She clutched the container of pastries she'd baked that very morning, flaky chocolate croissants he used to devour during their lean student years. As the elevator ascended each level, Alyssa felt a mounting sense of both excitement and dread. Maybe Grant would beam with joy at her surprise visit, proudly show her around, and talk about the baby kicking. But a nagging voice in the back of her mind whispered that this day would not be so ordinary. And Alyssa remembered her grandmother's old saying, "When fear and hope collide, the results are never dull." Stepping out onto the 73rd floor felt like walking into a different universe. Alyssa was struck by the sleek minimalism white walls, gleaming glass partitions, and artwork that probably cost more than their entire home had back in the early days. She passed a row of employees hunched intently over their computers. Some recognized her at once and stood, greeting her awkwardly, as though they weren't sure whether to congratulate her on the pregnancy or usher her away. Sensing an unspoken tension in the air, Alyssa smiled graciously and asked for her husband. only to be told he was in a crucial meeting. She noticed more than a few nervous glances from staffers who avoided her gaze as they shuffled through documents. Something was off, very off. Her intuition was practically screaming now, telling her to prepare for a moment of devastating revelation. She brushed aside the uneasy stares and moved toward Grant's private office. Memories flashed through her mind of the early years, how they would joke about making it big someday. There had been so many sacrifices, so much love, and, above all, unwavering support. She had always trusted him implicitly, never bothering to question his late returns or the cancelled weekend brunches. If he was busy, it was for them, for their future, for the family they were about to start. Yet something inside her kept stirring, like the flutter of butterfly wings in her stomach, but sharper, more alarming. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby's gentle movement, as if her unborn child was sharing in her tension. When she reached his office door, it was ajar, revealing a sight that nearly caused her to drop the pastries. Grant Coleman stood near his massive mahogany desk, not with one of his typical business partners or a corporate associate, but with Jessica Malone, a golden-haired Hollywood icon known worldwide for her starring roles, red carpet glamour, and headline-making romances. Jessica looked every bit the movie star in a sleek designer dress that must have cost a fortune. Alyssa felt her mouth go dry as she took in the actress's presence in her husband's office. But it wasn't just Jessica's fame that made the scene so unsettling. It was the way she and Grant were turned toward each other, arms faintly brushing, eyes locked in an intensity that spoke of more than mere business dealings. Alyssa's mind whirled. She'd heard about Jessica Malone's philanthropic ventures, her rumored Hollywood feuds, and her recent divorce from a notoriously volatile producer. But never in her wildest dreams had Alyssa imagined crossing paths with her, let alone in such intimate circumstances. Jessica was the type of star who attracted attention wherever she went, and paparazzi trailing her was a given. Why then would she be meeting Grant in secret? Why did her husband not mention that a global superstar was dropping by for a supposed business matter? And above all, why was Jessica leaning toward him with a gaze that sparkled with affection or something equally dangerous? The air in the room felt thick, as if charged with an electric tension. Jessica was the first to notice Alyssa's presence, whipping her gaze toward the door. Alarm flickered across the actress's face, vanishing quickly behind a practiced Hollywood grin. Grant spun around next, his expression jolting from surprise to guilt, and then to something that resembled forced composure. "Alyssa," he began, swallowing hard, "I didn't think you'd drop by." The stammer in his voice, so unlike his usual polished confidence, hammered home that he was caught unprepared. There was no missing the subtle flush on his cheeks or the slight clench of his jaw. Meanwhile, Jessica offered a dazzling smile, stepping away from Grant with the grace of a performer switching scenes. Alyssa could barely muster a greeting, her breath clipped by a swirl of bewilderment and heartbreak. An awkward shuffle ensued. Grant attempted to make introductions, but his voice wavered with uncertainty. Jessica extended a slender hand, her expression meticulously poised. A small flicker of vulnerability quivered in her eyes, but it was gone before Alyssa could fully register it. "We were just discussing a potential collaboration," Jessica said smoothly, tipping her chin up with practiced elegance. "Your husband has done wonders in the tech industry, and I'm exploring new avenues to broaden my brand's reach." The explanation sounded rehearsed, but Alyssa couldn't ignore the undercurrent of tension swirling beneath the actress's polished veneer. Then again, perhaps it was just Alyssa's swirling emotions projecting onto the star, and yet the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. A part of Alyssa wished she could march right out. Another part of her felt compelled to confront them both, to release the storm of betrayal surging inside. But the voice of caution, born of years of trusting Grant, urged her to hold on. Maybe she was jumping to conclusions. Could there be a logical explanation? After all, celebrities sometimes invested in tech startups, and Jessica Malone might be one of them. That didn't mean an affair was afoot. Yet she couldn't unsee the glances, the subtle closeness she had witnessed. And she certainly couldn't unfeel the tangled swirl of emotions within her. Her mind roared with questions, but fear kept her silent. She simply set the box of pastries on Grant's desk, forcing a polite smile even as her heart thumped so loudly it reverberated in her ears. Grant cleared his throat, looking anywhere but at his wife's eyes. "Those look delicious," he said quietly. Jessica lifted an eyebrow, eyeing the pastries as if they belonged in an alien museum. "I used to bake these for Grant back when we had nothing but a single burner in a studio apartment," Alyssa murmured, trying to keep her voice even. For a split second, she was aware of the stark contrast. Jessica's extravagance in a designer dress versus Alyssa's modest maternity outfit. "So, how is the baby?" Jessica asked, her smile guarded. The question made Alyssa's chest tighten. Why did the actress care? Was this small talk or something more profound? Alyssa managed a faint nod. "He's very active lately." She pressed a hand to her abdomen, almost as if to shield her unborn child from the tension swirling in the room. As if on cue, Grant claimed there was an urgent phone call he had to attend to, leaving Jessica and Alyssa momentarily alone. Jessica's expression flickered some strange blend of sympathy and caution, as though she was torn between comforting Alyssa and staying in her starlet persona. For a brief moment, Alyssa glimpsed something raw in the actress's eyes, a sense of conflict or regret. It was fleeting, but enough to momentarily disorient her. What was going on behind that polished facade? Before she could speak, Jessica slid her gaze away, refocusing on a framed photograph on Grant's desk. In that photo, Alyssa and Grant were beaming at the camera, arms slung around each other's shoulders during an anniversary trip to Bora Bora. Jessica's expression was unreadable as she studied it. Grant reappeared, phone in hand, feigning an apologetic tone. "There's a minor crisis with one of our developers," he explained. Jessica promptly seized this as her cue to leave. With a practiced pivot, she offered them both a final, radiant smile. "I'll be in touch," she said, voice light, but eyes oddly dark with secrecy. The moment she left, it was as though a spell had been broken in the room. Alyssa rounded on Grant, her hand still protectively over her belly. "What is going on here?" she whispered, her voice trembling with desperation and anger. He opened his mouth, but no immediate explanation came forth. That indecision spoke volumes. In all their years together, Alyssa had never seen him so tongue-tied, and in that wavering silence, her worst suspicions multiplied. Grant spun a story about a potential business deal, how Jessica Malone's production company was exploring interactive content, and how an NDA prevented him from telling Alyssa anything until the ink was dry. That was why he hadn't mentioned her. Yet Alyssa noticed how his voice never fully regained its usual authoritative tone, and every time she tried to hold his gaze, he looked away. The pieces of the puzzle weren't adding up. Could he really have sealed such a hush-hush deal without any of his staff or legal team being aware? Why would Jessica personally appear at his office if they were merely brokering a straightforward agreement? The more she pressed, the more convoluted his explanations became. It left Alyssa with the gnawing certainty that there was a deeper secret he wasn't revealing. A few days later, Alyssa tried to put the incident out of her mind, chalking her suspicions up to pregnancy hormones and an overactive imagination. But then a string of odd events began to unfold. She'd pass by Grant's phone ringing at odd hours, and each time he would snatch it up hastily, stepping away to whisper in hushed tones. Courier packages bearing no return address started arriving at the house, addressed only to Grant. He claimed they were prototypes or promotional items, yet he never opened them in front of her. It all caused her anxiety to mount, robbing her of restful sleep. Night after night, she found herself imagining the worst Grant secretly in love with a Hollywood actress, the glitz and glamour of a star-studded existence. But the thought felt so surreal, she almost convinced herself it was impossible. The uneasy lull broke spectacularly one crisp Friday evening. Alyssa was rummaging through the walk-in closet for a pair of comfortable flats when she stumbled across a mysterious garment bag from an upscale boutique on Rodeo Drive. Gucci, an undeniable real-world brand. Inside was a shimmering evening gown. At first, Alyssa wondered if it was a surprise present for her, but the dress was clearly not maternity-friendly, nor was it her size. Doubt twisted her stomach into knots. She confronted Grant that very night. His face turned ashen when she revealed her discovery. He stuttered that it was a gift meant for a business associate, someone important he needed to impress. Yet the expression on his face told her it was more than that. Unable to quell her suspicions, Alyssa decided to do something she'd never done before: follow him. The next night, Grant said he had a client dinner in Beverly Hills. So Alyssa, heart-pounding, left home shortly after he did, determined to see if her fears held any merit. Driving carefully, she trailed Grant's Mercedes through the affluent neighborhoods until he pulled into the gated driveway of a sleek, modern mansion. She parked discreetly down the street and watched as he walked up to the door with a bouquet of white orchids. Alyssa's heart stung. Those were the same flowers he'd given her when he proposed. She swallowed her tears, staying hidden as the door swung open and Jessica Malone appeared, radiant in a short, glittering cocktail dress. Alyssa's heart nearly stopped. Their conversation was inaudible at this distance, but there was no mistaking the familiarity in the way they hugged. For a full hour, Alyssa remained huddled in her car, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, eyes locked on the front windows of the mansion. Through the gauzy curtains, she occasionally glimpsed Grant and Jessica passing by, talking, laughing, or standing too close. Each minute felt like a physical blow, doubling her sense of betrayal. This time, there was no rationalizing it away. It wasn't some last-minute business meeting with an important investor. Something deeper was going on, and Alyssa felt rage, devastation, and heartbreak swirl inside her chest like a storm. She envisioned the baby, wondering if the child could sense the mother's turmoil. At long last, Grant re-emerged, adjusting his tie. Jessica stood at the door, leaning in to whisper something that made him smirk. The sight was like a dagger to Alyssa's soul. She spent that night sobbing quietly, locked in the guest room so Grant wouldn't see. By morning, she decided, no more secrets. She demanded answers, confronting him in the living room as soon as he woke. Her voice trembled with hurt and fury. Grant's face went pale, and for a moment she thought he might outright confess. Instead, he insisted that Jessica was simply an investor who valued privacy and had invited him over for an informal dinner. He told Alyssa she was letting her hormones cloud her judgment. Frustrated and wounded, she found herself questioning everything. Had the love of her life truly become this callous? Or was she indeed delusional, misinterpreting an innocent business relationship? Desperate for answers, Alyssa turned to someone within Grant's company, the lead accountant, a quiet but observant woman named Marisol. Under the guise of needing advice about maternity benefits, Alyssa invited Marisol out to lunch. Between sips of iced tea, Marisol revealed that there had been irregularities in the corporate expenses recently. Transactions marked private project were draining hefty sums. Each invoice was tied to the same name, Malone Entertainment. Marisol had questioned Grant, only to be told it was an ongoing development arrangement covered by a confidentiality clause. Yet the expenses didn't match typical software licensing or marketing costs. Instead, they were extravagant purchases, jewelry, resort bookings, even a diamond-encrusted watch from the prestigious Cartier boutique. Listening to Marisol's account, Alyssa's pulse pounded with a mix of rage and fear. The net was closing on the truth, and she hated every second of it. Emboldened by Marisol's revelations, Alyssa devised a plan to confront Grant head-on. She would gather concrete proof and force him to acknowledge the truth. The following week, while he was traveling for a so-called investors' conference, she hired a private investigator. The Pi was a discreet professional who had handled high-profile cases in the city. Within days, the investigator confirmed Alyssa's suspicions. Grant had been spending nights in a luxurious suite at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel with Jessica Malone. Receipts showed decadent dinners, late-night room service, and even spa appointments booked under pseudonyms. Armed with this damning evidence, Alyssa felt a wrenching in her soul. She loved Grant, how could she not, after all their years together? But she also felt a fierce need to protect herself and their unborn child from this monstrous betrayal. Yet, as if matters weren't complicated enough, the investigator uncovered something even more astonishing. Jessica was in deep financial trouble. Her ex-husband's lawsuit over defamation and property disputes threatened to bankrupt her. She needed a wealthy ally to help cover her mounting legal fees, and Grant had apparently stepped in to finance certain aspects. The question was why? Did he truly care for her, or was he entangled in some precarious business arrangement with the promise of Hollywood prestige? Either possibility left Alyssa reeling. She clutched the PI's file with a trembling hand, tears burning in her eyes. The heartbreak was real, but the layers of deception and potential exploitation made it far more complex. Who was using whom in this twisted dance of money and fame? Determined to confront the situation head-on, Alyssa arranged a meeting with Grant at his office, intentionally scheduling it on the same day. Jessica was due to visit for a strategy session. The tension in the building was palpable from the moment she arrived. Employees parted like a silent wave as she marched through, their eyes flicking with curiosity and concern. Alyssa no longer felt apologetic about her presence. She had to stand up for herself and her unborn baby. When she finally stepped into Grant's office, she found him and Jessica sitting close, reviewing documents on a tablet. Jessica turned to see Alyssa, eyes widening with a mix of surprise and a hint of respect, perhaps, for the sheer audacity of arriving unannounced. Grant looked paralyzed, color draining from his face. Alyssa wasted no time. She threw the file of incriminating evidence on his desk, the pages spilling out, painting a damning picture of his double life. For a moment, the room was deafeningly silent, the air vibrating with tension. Then Grant's defenses crumbled, and he broke down words, tumbling out in a desperate, guilt-ridden confession. He claimed it started as a straightforward business investment, but Jessica had manipulated his admiration for her celebrity status. Each time he tried to pull away, Jessica threatened to halt their partnership, ruin his reputation with damaging rumors, or retract her investment. His entire enterprise, he insisted, was teetering on a precarious edge. Losing Jessica's endorsement could cause a catastrophic fall in stock values. But as he continued speaking, his pleas for understanding came off hollow. In Alyssa's eyes, he was justifying a web of lies and infidelity, using business as an excuse. Jessica remained conspicuously silent, shifting uncomfortably, as though the carefully choreographed performance had slipped from her control. Suddenly, Jessica snapped. She refused to be blamed entirely, pointing out that Grant was more than willing to indulge in private dinners and luxury escapades. She admitted that she had used her star power as leverage, but only because she herself felt cornered. Her ex-husband's legal threats loomed large, and she needed a financial safe haven. The entire arrangement was a toxic tangle of exploitation and attraction, a slow dance of greed that spiraled out of control. Alyssa listened, appalled, fury surging through her veins. She couldn't believe that the man she once trusted implicitly had become so entangled with someone who was equally desperate. And now, the unborn child was a silent witness to this horrifying breakdown of morals. Tears burned in Alyssa's eyes, but she refused to collapse under the weight of betrayal. She spoke with a quiet determination that made both Grant and Jessica fall silent. "You had a choice," she told Grant, her voice shaking. "You could have told me what was happening, trusted me. We built Coleman Enterprises together from the ground up, and yet you excluded me from the biggest conflict of our lives." She turned to Jessica. "You say you're desperate, but it doesn't excuse shattering someone else's marriage." Jessica's composure faltered at the raw sincerity in Alyssa's eyes. For an agonizing moment, nobody spoke. Then Alyssa declared she wanted a divorce, effectively slamming the door on any illusions that their marriage was salvageable. Grant crumbled, pleading that he'd drop the deal, that he'd do anything to make it right. But it was far too late. Days later, Alyssa reached out to her longtime friend, a high-profile attorney named Simone Delgado. Armed with the evidence from the private investigator, Alyssa began the divorce proceedings, demanding a fair settlement to ensure security for her and the baby. The public soon caught wind of the scandal. Paparazzi hounded Grant for statements about his alleged affair with Jessica Malone. Meanwhile, Jessica faced a fresh wave of negative press headlines accusing her of being a homewrecker during a vulnerable time in Alyssa's pregnancy. Ironically, the publicity threatened to do more damage to Jessica's career than any lawsuit her ex-husband could throw at her. Grant's investors panicked, leading to a downward spiral in Coleman Enterprises' market value. The stock prices tumbled. Business partners withdrew their support. Karma, it seemed, was arriving with vengeance. Witnessing Grant's empire crumble in real time stirred a maelstrom of conflicted emotions in Alyssa. She recalled the nights they'd spent coding lines of software side by side, the celebratory pizza parties whenever they closed a modest deal, the starry-eyed discussions about building a prosperous future. Now, it was all disintegrating before her eyes, undone by the greed and vanity that had crept into their lives. Jessica Malone tried to salvage her own reputation by releasing a public statement, claiming she had never intended to come between a married couple. But the damage was done. The moment the tabloids got hold of incriminating photos and financial records linking Jessica and Grant in suspect ways, her brand endorsements shrank. Charities distanced themselves. Even her once adoring fans turned skeptical. Amid the chaos, Alyssa found solace in her unborn child, focusing on her health and well-being as the divorce inched forward. She moved out of the lavish mansion she once shared with Grant, opting to stay temporarily in a friend's cozy guest house near Santa Monica. Late at night, she would linger on the porch, feeling the coastal breeze brush past. Whispering promises of a new life, she discovered an inner resolve she never knew she possessed. Determined not to let her husband's betrayal define her, she reignited her love for writing, crafting a blog about personal growth, motherhood, and resilience. Much to her surprise, the blog gained traction, drawing in readers seeking hope and authenticity in a world saturated with glitz and spin. The final blow to Grant's illusions came one afternoon when he attempted to reconcile with Alyssa, showing up unannounced at her friend's property. He arrived looking nothing like the suave businessman she remembered, his eyes hollow, his tailored suit rumpled. He confessed that Jessica had pulled her financial support the moment their affair became public. As a result, half of his top clients had cancelled contracts, fearing negative publicity. Creditors were tightening their grip, and everything he built was on the verge of bankruptcy. He begged Alyssa to consider giving him another chance for the sake of their child. But as she gazed at him, all Alyssa felt was a calm certainty that she would no longer invest her heart in a man who treated it like collateral. Over the following weeks, Karmic Retribution continued its steady march. Jessica's latest film project lost funding, forcing production to shut down. Rumors spread that her ex-husband's legal team was poised to seize many of her assets. Photographers hounded her at every turn, capturing images of her looking weary and distressed. The once shining star was left with a tarnished reputation and significant financial troubles. Meanwhile, Grant faced lawsuits from disgruntled investors, culminating in a forced liquidation of many of his assets. The U.S. Bank Tower office space was handed over to the company's board of directors, who were trying to salvage what remained of Coleman Enterprises. The media painted Grant as a cautionary tale of hubris, highlighting how fast success could unravel when built on lies. Alyssa watched these developments from a distance, focusing on her own healing and the impending arrival of her baby. She pursued a spousal settlement that would cover her child's future, determined to provide a stable environment free from drama. On the eve of her due date, she received word that the court had approved her demands enough to secure a modest home and a comfortable nest egg. As she folded tiny onesies and prepared the baby's crib, she felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. It was not how she had pictured bringing a new life into the world. Yet perhaps it was a second chance for both mother and child, a fresh start, stripped of illusions, grounded in self-respect and resilience. The night of her labor arrived in a swirl of adrenaline. Contractions began in the early evening. Alyssa's friend rushed her to Cedar's Sinai Medical Center. Though the hours were intense and the pain excruciating, she clung to her determination. When her baby boy finally arrived, Alyssa was overwhelmed by a surge of love so powerful. It blurred every bitter memory, every betrayal. In that bright, sterile hospital room, new life blossomed, overshadowing darkness. Tears of joy streamed down her cheeks as she held the precious little one to her chest. She whispered promises of devotion, vowing to never let him feel unwanted or unloved. In the following days, as she recuperated, the swirl of media attention gradually faded. Grant attempted to visit at the hospital, but Alyssa refused. She needed closure and healing on her own terms. Instead, she allowed him to meet his son a week later in a calm, supervised setting arranged by her attorney. Their exchange was civil, though steeped in an air of profound regret on Grant's part. He seemed hollow, as if only now grasping the true cost of his betrayal. Alyssa stayed strong, reminding herself that forgiveness, if it ever came, would follow a path of her choosing, not out of his desperation or convenience. Over the next few months, the divorce was finalized. Alyssa found a charming bungalow in a quiet neighborhood where she could focus on motherhood and re-establish her life. Though she sometimes felt pangs of loneliness in the silent stretches of evening, the gentle cooing of her baby and her own blossoming blog provided solace. Each day, more readers flocked to her platform, enthralled by her candid storytelling. She wrote about betrayal, self-discovery, and the joy of rebirth, topics that resonated with many. In a surprising twist, a small independent publishing house reached out, offering to compile her blog entries into a book. Alyssa realized that by sharing her darkest struggles, she had touched hearts around the world. Meanwhile, Jessica Malone vanished from the tabloids for a while, rumored to be seeking refuge at a wellness retreat in Switzerland. When she finally resurfaced, she gave a tearful interview, lamenting her many mistakes. She blamed the crushing pressure of Hollywood for her poor choices and asked for the public's empathy as she fought to rebuild her career. Yet the audience's response was lukewarm. Sponsors remained wary. Movie studios had replaced her with younger, scandal-free talent. It was a sobering lesson that even fame and fortune cannot shield one from the consequences of destructive actions. In a fleeting moment of curiosity, Alyssa watched clips of Jessica's interview online. She felt no triumph, only a calm sense of distance, like watching a distant storm pass. The final ripple of karmic resolution arrived in a way Alyssa never anticipated. A few months after her son's birth, she was contacted by a philanthropic organization. They had read her heartfelt blog entries and believed her experiences aligned with their mission to empower women facing domestic and emotional hardships. They invited her to speak at a women's conference in her hometown. Nervous yet determined, Alyssa accepted. Standing on stage, addressing a crowd of hopeful faces, she shared her journey from a naive wife blinded by devotion to a woman who discovered her own strength and reclaimed her life's path. The applause that followed was not just for her, but for every individual who had ever risen above betrayal. As the months turned into a year, Alyssa's life took on a new sense of purpose. She balanced her days with her energetic son, her writing pursuits, and her newfound role as a speaker. She occasionally heard distant rumors about Grant, how he'd sold off his remaining shares in Coleman Enterprises, how his attempts at new ventures were overshadowed by the scandal. At one point, he tried to contact her again, hinting at regret and a desire to be part of their son's life. Alyssa, for her son's benefit, agreed to a reasonable custody arrangement, but she remained firm in safeguarding her emotional boundaries. She had built too much strength to ever let him tear it down again. In her quiet bungalow, surrounded by her blog's achievements, baby laughter, and newfound friends, Alyssa reflected on the turbulent events that had reshaped her life. She remembered stepping into the US Bank Tower that fateful day, brimming with innocence and bearing homemade pastries for the man she loved. She had never anticipated that life could twist so dramatically in a matter of months. Yet, through the heartbreak, she discovered a reservoir of courage and resilience. She had learned that betrayal, no matter how devastating, could yield a transformative journey, if one chose to confront it head-on, with honesty, dignity, and self-belief. Late one evening, after tucking her son into bed, Alyssa gazed out at the city lights. The night sky was studded with countless possibilities, each shining star a testament to how vast life's potential could be. In her heart, she felt gratitude, strange as it might seem, for every painful moment, every revelation, because through that crucible of suffering, she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more devoted to her own happiness. When her phone chimed with a publisher's email about finalizing her book's release date, she felt a thrill course through her. It was a sign that the darkest chapter of her life was behind her, and a brighter one awaited. Though Grant had forfeited his chance at redemption in her heart, a morsel of mercy stirred within Alyssa. She hoped he would learn from his downfall, become a better father, and perhaps a more humble man. As for Jessica Malone, Alyssa wished her no ill will. Everyone, including the famous, faces their own battles and insecurities. The entangled fiasco had taught Alyssa a powerful lesson about the intersection of greed, fame, and vulnerability. In the end, they had all paid a heavy price. But Alyssa's karmic reward lay in the new life she was crafting, a life anchored by truth, nurtured by unconditional love for her son, and propelled by a future fueled by her own determination. And so, the final scene of betrayal and heartbreak gave way to new beginnings. Alyssa stood on the threshold of a future she was shaping on her own terms. Her story became a beacon for others walking through the fire of emotional turmoil, showing them that even the deepest wounds can heal, allowing courage to flourish in the scar's wake. While Grant dealt with the aftermath of his monumental missteps, and Jessica struggled to reinvent herself in a harsh industry, Alyssa soared on a fresh wind of self-discovery. Karmic justice had found its mark, and in its wake, Alyssa found not just closure, but a brilliant, uncharted path waiting for her, wide open and full of promise. Thank you for joining us on this intense journey of heartbreak, redemption, and renewed strength. Alyssa's story reminds us that no matter how shocking life's twists may be, an unwavering determination to seek truth and protect what matters most can light our path forward. Through one woman's pain and perseverance, we've seen how karmic retribution unfolds with quiet but powerful inevitability. If this story captivated you, share it with friends who enjoy suspense, drama, and a heartfelt resolution. Don't forget to hit like to show your support, and remember to subscribe for more stories that explore the remarkable resilience of the human heart. Your support means everything. Stay tuned for our next tale.